On Christmas morning, I ironed the red dress my late husband always said made me look like December itself. I wanted to look my best for my son. It was the first Christmas since I sold our family home, and I'd told myself that this year would be about peace, not loneliness. I baked Daniel's favorite sweet potato casserole, wrapped presents for the grandchildren, and drove 2 hours in the cold, telling myself that maybe this year would be different, that maybe Melissa would finally see me as family. I was wrong. When I pulled up to their house on Maple Street, every window glowed warm gold. Inside, I could see shadows moving, laughter spilling out, silhouettes of people passing plates across the table. My heart softened. For a moment, I thought, they waited for me. I rang the doorbell, holding my casserole like a gift. Melissa opened the door wearing a silk blouse and an expression I've come to know too well, something between pity and annoyance. "Oh, Dorothy," she said, her voice honeyed but cold. "You didn't get my text?" My stomach dropped. "Text?" I asked, smiling, though my fingers had started to tremble from the chill. She sighed, shifting her weight. "I sent it an hour ago. We didn't plan for an extra place at the table this year. The dining room is just, well, full, but don't worry, I made sure there's a plate for you." She disappeared into the kitchen, heels clicking on the tile like a metronome counting down my humiliation. When she came back, she was holding a disposable plastic plate, half filled with scraps of turkey, a spoonful of cold stuffing, and the corner of a dinner roll. "For me?" I managed, my throat tightening. "It's just easier this way," she said. "You know how crowded it gets with Daniel's co-workers here. You can sit out on the porch. It's heated now." She smiled as if she'd done me a kindness. The words hung in the air like frost. "Sit out on the porch." I looked past her shoulder. The table inside was beautifully set. 8 seats, candles flickering in crystal holders, the smell of rosemary and butter floating through the air. My casserole dish sat untouched on the counter, unserved. "I understand," I said quietly, though every part of me screamed. Melissa's smile widened, sensing victory. "Good. We'll bring you dessert later." She placed the plate in my hands like she was feeding a stray. I stepped outside, the door closing behind me with a soft but final click. The porch heater hummed faintly. Snowflakes drifted down, catching the light from inside. I sat on the wicker chair, plastic plate on my lap, and watched through the window as they lifted their glasses for a toast. Daniel was laughing, my son, my only child, oblivious to the fact that his mother was sitting alone outside like some unwanted guest. Every clink of glass felt like a small betrayal, every burst of laughter like a reminder of where I didn't belong. Melissa's words echoed in my mind, cold and polished. "You can sit out on the porch." I'd been called worse things in my life, but never had cruelty worn such an elegant dress. I stared at the plate in my lap. The turkey was dry, the gravy congealed. My appetite was gone, replaced by a heavy ache that settled deep in my chest. For years, I had helped them, paid their down payment, watched their kids every time Melissa had a work trip. When Daniel lost his job, I covered the mortgage for 6 months without telling a soul. And now, this woman, the one who'd walked into my son's life with perfume and ambition, was telling me I didn't belong in my own family's celebration. The wind picked up, brushing my hair across my face. I closed my eyes and let the hurt come. I'd always been taught that good women forgive, that family means patience, that love requires sacrifice. But sitting there, with the sound of forks and laughter just beyond the glass, I began to wonder if I'd mistaken silence for grace. I thought back to the first time I met Melissa, how she'd smiled and said, "I hope you don't mind that Daniel and I are doing things our own way." I hadn't minded then. I was just happy my boy had found someone. But over time, the our way became my way, and Daniel had faded into her shadow. I could have stood up, walked inside, and demanded respect. But I didn't, because something inside me had shifted, not broken, shifted. Beneath the humiliation, beneath the ache, a small, calm voice whispered, "This isn't the end. Not tonight." I watched the reflection of the Christmas tree glimmer on the glass. Inside, Melissa leaned toward Daniel, laughing at something, her hand resting on his shoulder. It was all performance. Every gesture rehearsed for admiration. I'd seen it before. The way she treated people as steps on a ladder. The way she smiled at her boss, Tom, just a little too long at Thanksgiving last year. The late-night phone calls she said were about marketing reports. I hadn't planned to use what I knew. I'd collected the truth out of fear, not malice. A few photos, a message thread, a business dinner that turned into something else. I told myself it wasn't my place to interfere. But tonight, as the porch light flickered and the cold crept into my hands, I realized something I should have learned long ago. Sometimes silence doesn't make you noble. It makes you invisible. The door opened for a moment and Melissa peeked out. "Still comfortable out here?" she asked with a fake laugh. "Hope it's not too cold for you. We're just doing gifts now. Maybe you can come in later when the kids are asleep. It gets less chaotic then." I smiled, polite as ever. "I'm fine, dear. Don't worry about me." She tilted her head, clearly pleased with herself, then went back inside. As the door closed again, I caught sight of Daniel lifting a glass for another toast. His face, so full of joy, cut through me like glass. He had no idea what his wife had just done. And maybe that was my fault too. I'd shielded him from the truth, afraid of losing him. But as I sat there, surrounded by the smell of pine and snow and roasted meat, something in me hardened, not in bitterness, but in resolve. This wouldn't happen again. I looked down at my cold plate, then at the phone in my coat pocket. It held everything, proof of Melissa's affair, the messages, the photos she'd sent to her boss, Tom. Evidence I'd gathered for months, convincing myself I'd never use it. But tonight was different. Tonight, she'd drawn the line herself. Inside, laughter rose again, echoing through the windows. I stood, straightened my coat, and looked at my reflection in the glass. Wrinkled hands, tired eyes, but a steady face. For the first time in years, I didn't see a woman being pitied. I saw someone who had finally remembered her worth. Christmas, it seemed, was about to take a turn. The night air was sharp, the kind that makes your breath visible. I stayed seated for a long time after Melissa went back inside, listening to the muffled sound of music and conversation. Each laugh that drifted through the walls felt like another reminder that I didn't belong there. My fingers were stiff from the cold, but I didn't move. I couldn't. When the porch light flickered again, I finally reached into my coat pocket and pulled out my phone. For months, I had carried it like a secret weapon I never meant to use. Every time I looked at those pictures, a part of me hoped I was wrong, that I had misunderstood. But Melissa had made sure there was no misunderstanding tonight. I opened the folder. There she was, smiling in a hotel lobby next to her boss, Tom. Another photo, her hand on his arm at a business dinner. Text messages that didn't sound like work at all. I had gathered them quietly, one by one, each time she slipped and said too much or left her phone unattended during a visit. I never wanted to hurt my son, but she had left me no choice. The door opened again. Melissa stepped out, holding a mug of cocoa. "You're still out here," she said like it was a surprise. "I thought you might have gone home already." Her tone was sweet, but there was satisfaction behind it. She was enjoying this. That hurt more than the cold. "I was just thinking," I said. "Oh?" She leaned against the doorframe. "About what?" "About how family traditions change," I replied. "How people change too." She smiled, not really listening. "Well, it's a new generation. Things can't stay the same forever. You had your time, Dorothy. You had your time." The word stung. It wasn't what she said. It was how easily she said it, as if I were some outdated decoration that no longer matched her house. I looked down at my phone again and took a slow breath. My heart was beating so fast I could feel it in my throat. "Melissa," I said softly, "do you love my son?" She blinked, clearly not expecting that question. "Of course I do," she said quickly. Why would you ask something like that? Because love doesn't make people cruel, I said. And what you did tonight, it wasn't kindness. Her smile faded. I don't know what you're talking about, she said, her voice tightening. I've been nothing but welcoming to you. Welcoming. That word almost made me laugh. I thought about all the times she'd forgotten to invite me to birthdays, how she'd rolled her eyes when Daniel wasn't looking, how she'd corrected me at the dinner table for small things. Each memory felt like a small cut that I had ignored for years. I think you know what I mean, I said quietly, and I think you know why I'm asking. I turned the screen toward her. The photos glowed under the porch light. For a moment, she didn't move. Then her face changed, her confidence cracking like thin ice. Where did you get those? She whispered. That doesn't matter, I said. What matters is that I know. And soon, Daniel will too. Her voice dropped to a sharp whisper. You wouldn't dare. I looked her straight in the eyes. You dared to humiliate me tonight. You dared to treat me like I was nothing. So yes, Melissa, I would. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. The only sound was the wind and the faint hum of the porch heater. She tried to find her words, but her voice came out uneven. You'll destroy him, she said. No, I said. You already did. I'm just telling the truth. Her hand shook slightly as she reached for the door. You don't understand. This isn't what it looks like. It's exactly what it looks like, I said, and you know it. Before she could respond, I opened my messages and sent the photos to Daniel. My thumb hovered for only a second before I pressed send. It was the calmest I had felt all night. Melissa gasped, realizing what I'd done. You'll regret this, she hissed, but her voice broke halfway through. Maybe, I said. But not as much as you will. Inside, I heard movement, footsteps, the sudden quieting of music. Daniel's voice called out from the dining room, confused, asking her name. Melissa froze. The color drained from her face. I stood up, smoothing my coat. It's Christmas, Melissa, I said softly. You told me there was no place for me at the table. Maybe now you'll understand what that feels like. For a moment, she just stared at me, her eyes wide, lips trembling. Then she turned and ran back inside. I stayed where I was, my heart pounding, the glow from the house spilling across the snow. I didn't feel triumphant, just steady, like I'd finally stopped apologizing for existing. Through the window, I saw Daniel pick up his phone. His expression changed as he read the messages. The noise inside faded into silence. I didn't move, not yet. I wanted to see the truth take its first breath. The cold no longer bothered me. For the first time in years, I felt awake. The moment Daniel stepped into the living room, the air in that house changed. The laughter stopped. The clinking of glasses fell silent. You could almost hear the candles flicker. He stood there, phone in hand, staring at the screen like he couldn't quite believe what he was reading. Melissa followed behind him, her face pale, her voice trembling as she said, Daniel, it's not what it looks like. I stayed by the doorway, half in shadow, my hands clasped together to keep them from shaking. My heart wasn't racing the way I thought it would. It was slower, steadier, like something deep inside me had already accepted what was coming. Daniel looked up at his wife. Then tell me what it is, he said, his voice quiet but sharp enough to slice through the silence. Melissa moved closer to him, reaching for his arm, but he stepped back. It was just work, she said quickly. Tom and I, we were planning a campaign, that's all. He looked down at his phone again. You sent him pictures, he said flatly. You told him you loved him. She froze, her mouth opening but no words coming out. Every eye in that room turned to her. The guests, his co-workers, the Andersons, the Pattersons, shifted in their seats, the room heavy with disbelief. No one spoke. Even the children had gone quiet in the other room. I should have felt vindicated. For years I'd been invisible, talked over, dismissed. Now, every cruel word, every smirk, Every cold shoulder was being exposed under the same warm lights she'd used to humiliate me. But instead of joy, I felt something else. Sadness. Because my son's face looked like the night he was 10 years old and realized his father wasn't coming home anymore. Melissa tried again. "Daniel, you don't understand," she said, her voice cracking. "Your mother. She's trying to turn you against me." My stomach twisted at that. Even now, she found a way to make herself the victim. I wanted to speak, to tell him the truth, but my voice caught in my throat. He needed to see it himself. He turned to me then. "Mom," he said softly, "is this true?" I took a breath. "I wish it weren't," I said, "but I couldn't watch you be lied to anymore." For a moment, he looked between us. His mother and his wife, the two people who were supposed to love him most, and I saw the pain in his eyes, the kind of pain that makes you question everything. Melissa's face hardened. "You're really doing this, huh?" she said to me. "On Christmas? In front of everyone?" "You did this," I said quietly. "I just stopped pretending." That was when she snapped. Her voice rose, her words spilling out in a rush. "You've never liked me. You've been jealous since the day I married Daniel. You can't stand that he has a life without you." Every word hit like a stone. For years, I'd been her silent support, babysitting, cooking, helping with bills when Daniel's job was shaky. I had stood by her even when she rolled her eyes at my gifts, even when she called me old-fashioned in front of her friends. And now she stood there, throwing my love back at me like it was poison. "I paid for your first house," I said, my voice shaking now. "I sat by your hospital bed when you had your first baby. I took care of your children so you could chase your career. And tonight, you served me scraps on a porch." The room fell completely still. Melissa's face turned red, her lips parting as if she wanted to argue. But she couldn't. She knew it was true. Then came the twist I didn't expect. Daniel put his phone down and said, "Mom, go sit down for a moment." His tone was calm, almost too calm. For a second, I thought he was angry with me. My heart dropped. But then he looked at Melissa. "I want to hear everything. From you." She hesitated. "Daniel, please." "From you," he repeated. She started talking fast, half-truths mixed with excuses, trying to twist the story. "Tom and I were close, yes, but it wasn't what you think. He was just supportive. I needed someone to talk to. You were always busy. Your mother, she doesn't like me. She's never accepted me. I was lonely." The word lonely hit me harder than I expected, because I knew loneliness too. I'd lived with it every day since my husband passed, but loneliness doesn't excuse cruelty. It doesn't excuse betrayal. I stood up slowly. "Melissa," I said, my voice steady now, "you had someone to talk to. You had Daniel. You just didn't want to listen." Her jaw tightened. "You think you're better than me?" she spat. "You think being old makes you wise?" "No," I said. "It just means I've had more time to learn what not to be." Daniel's co-workers exchanged uneasy glances. The Christmas lights reflected off their glasses, the ornaments shimmering like small, silent witnesses. Then Daniel spoke again, his voice quiet but final. "I think you should leave." "Melissa." Her head snapped toward him. "You're choosing her over me?" He looked at her for a long moment. "I'm choosing the truth," he said. She stood frozen, her perfect image cracking piece by piece. I saw tears start to form, but not the kind that come from regret, the kind that come from losing control. She stormed off toward the hallway, her heels echoing through the house. When the door slammed, the room felt smaller somehow, quieter. Daniel sank onto the couch, his face pale. I wanted to go to him, to comfort him, but I knew this was a moment he needed to sit with. Through the window, I saw snow beginning to fall, soft, steady, unhurried. It covered the porch, the steps, the street beyond, and I realized something. Revenge hadn't brought me peace, but truth had. Daniel finally looked up at me. "I didn't know," he said, his voice breaking. I know, I said gently. That's why I had to show you. He nodded, his eyes wet. You didn't deserve any of that. For the first time that night, I smiled, a small, tired smile. I guess we both learned what love shouldn't look like. He reached over and took my hand, and as the last of the guests quietly slipped out, leaving just the two of us in that dim, broken room, I felt something I hadn't in years, something stronger than anger or revenge. I felt seen. After Melissa left the room, the silence felt heavy, like the air itself had forgotten how to move. Daniel sat there staring at the floor, holding his phone like it was something fragile. I didn't speak. I just watched him, the way I used to when he was a boy trying not to cry after scraping his knee. The guests had quietly gathered their coats and slipped out, whispering polite goodbyes, pretending not to look at us. The glow from the tree was still warm, but everything else felt cold. Then the front door opened again. The wind carried in the faint sound of tires crunching on snow. Melissa was standing there, her hair wild from the storm outside, her voice sharp. You think you can throw me out like this? She said. You have no idea what you're doing, Daniel. Daniel looked up slowly. Melissa, please, he said. Just go home. This is my home, she snapped, and I'm not leaving until you hear me out. Her defiance was familiar. It was the same tone she used when she wanted to win an argument, the same one that made everyone else back down. But tonight, Daniel didn't. He looked tired, older somehow. I saw everything, he said quietly. There's nothing left to explain. She turned to me then, her eyes narrowing. This is your fault, she said. You've poisoned him against me. I wanted to answer, but I didn't. There was no point. She wouldn't hear it. She started pacing the room, her words coming faster. Do you know what you've done? I've worked for years to build my career, to build this family, and now it's all gone because of you. Her voice cracked on that last word, and for the first time that night, I saw fear behind her anger. She wasn't just losing Daniel. She was losing the image she had worked so hard to protect. Then Daniel's phone buzzed again. He looked down, frowning. It's Tom, he said. Melissa froze. Don't answer that, she said quickly, but he did. And whatever Tom said on the other end made his expression go blank. When he hung up, his voice was quiet but firm. He told me you've been using my name on credit accounts, thousands of dollars, vacations, hotel stays. Melissa's face went white. He's lying, she said, but her voice was shaking now. Daniel pulled up his banking app. No, he's not, he said. I'm looking at the statements right now. The color drained completely from her face. For years, I had watched her act in control, calm, polished, unshakable. But now she was unraveling right in front of us. She tried to reach for his phone, but he stepped back. You don't understand, she said again. I had to. You weren't making enough. We were drowning in bills. I did what I had to do. Her excuses landed like stones. I remembered all the times Daniel had worked overtime, missing family dinners to make ends meet. He'd trusted her with everything, and she'd used that trust like currency. Daniel sat down, covering his face with his hands. You've been lying to me for years, he said. She knelt in front of him, grabbing his hand, but he pulled it away. Daniel, please, she whispered. I can fix this. I can explain everything. His voice was steady. No, Melissa, you've already explained enough. I should have felt satisfied. This was the moment when the truth finally came out, when every cruel word she'd said to me came back to her. But all I felt was tired of pretending that kindness always wins, tired of believing that silence earns respect. Melissa stood up, wiping her tears. You'll regret this, she said, her voice low but shaking. Both of you. Daniel didn't answer. He just walked past her and opened the door. The wind blew snow into the hallway. Go, he said quietly. She hesitated, looking from him to me. Her eyes were filled with anger, but there was something else there too. Shame. She turned and walked out, without another word. The door shut behind her, and for a long moment, neither of us moved. The house felt different now, still decorated, still glowing, but hollow. I could smell the faint sweetness of cinnamon candles mixed with cold air. I wanted to comfort my son, but I knew there was nothing I could say that would make this night easier. He finally spoke. "I didn't see her for who she was," he said. I put my hand on his shoulder. "Love makes us blind sometimes," I said softly. "It makes us see what we want to see." He nodded, tears gathering in his eyes. "You didn't deserve any of the things she said to you." I smiled faintly. I think we both deserved better than what she gave us. Outside, a car door slammed, and her headlights disappeared down the street. The sound faded into the quiet hum of the heater. Daniel took a deep breath and looked at me. "Stay tonight," he said, "please." I hesitated, remembering the porch, the plastic plate, the feeling of being told I didn't belong. But then I looked at him, my son, broken, trying to rebuild. "Of course," I said gently. "I'm not going anywhere." As he went upstairs to check on the kids, I sat on the couch surrounded by the remains of Christmas. Wrapping paper scattered on the floor, candles half melted, a single ornament still swinging on the tree. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like a guest in his house. The lies were gone. So was the woman who built them. And in the quiet that followed, I felt something close to peace. The next morning, the house was quiet. The storm had passed, leaving a thin layer of snow over everything. I woke early, the kind of early that comes from habit, not rest. Daniel was still asleep upstairs with the kids, and for the first time in years, the kitchen was mine again. I brewed a pot of coffee, the smell filling the air, and sat by the window watching the snow melt slowly from the trees. The night before felt like a dream, or maybe a reckoning that had waited too long to come. My phone buzzed on the table. A message. For a second, I thought it might be Melissa, but it wasn't. It was from an unknown number. When I opened it, I saw a name I didn't expect. Tom, her boss. The message was short. "I'm sorry for what happened. I respected you more than you know. She told me stories about how you raised Daniel alone. You deserved better." I stared at the screen, unsure how to feel. It wasn't comfort exactly, but it was something like acknowledgement. For so many years, I'd been treated like a piece of old furniture, useful, but forgotten. To hear even a stranger say I deserved better, it meant more than I wanted to admit. I heard footsteps on the stairs. Daniel came into the kitchen, his face tired but softer than the night before. "You didn't sleep," he said gently. "I've had worse nights," I replied with a small smile. He poured himself a cup of coffee and sat across from me. "The kids keep asking where their mom is," he said. I didn't know what to tell them. I nodded. "Tell them she needed some time away. They don't need the details yet." He looked at me with a mix of guilt and gratitude. "You've always protected us," he said quietly, "even when we didn't deserve it." That caught me off guard. I wasn't sure what to say, so I just reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "We all make mistakes," I said. "What matters is what we do next." He took a deep breath. "I want you here next Christmas," he said suddenly. "No more excuses, no more busy schedules. I want you home." The word home hit me harder than I expected. For years, I'd convinced myself that I didn't need to belong anywhere, that being strong meant staying quiet, staying on the edges. But hearing my son say it, with that kind of honesty, felt like finally being seen again. Before I could answer, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was a message from Melissa. I hesitated before opening it. "You win," it read. "I lost everything. I hope you're happy." I stared at the words for a long time. There was no apology in them, no remorse, just bitterness. For a moment, the old pain flared again, the memory of her standing in that doorway with a plastic plate in her hand. I could still hear her voice saying, "You can sit on the porch." I started typing a reply, a dozen different versions of what I could say. But then I deleted them all. There was nothing left to prove. Some truths didn't need an audience. I turned off my phone and set it face down on the table. Daniel watched me, waiting. "Everything okay?" "Yes," I said, and I meant it. When he left for work later that morning, I stood outside for a while, watching the neighborhood slowly come to life. Cars starting, neighbors shoveling their driveways, the world moving on. I walked to my car, brushed off the snow, and sat for a moment before turning the key. The air inside was cold, but the light through the windshield was soft and bright. I glanced at the house one last time. The same house where, just a night ago, I'd been told I didn't belong. Now my son was inside making breakfast for his kids, his voice gentle again. That was enough for me. As I drove home, snowflakes began to fall again. Light, quiet, forgiving. The world looked cleaner somehow, as if everything that had been broken had been rinsed in white. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel invisible. I parked in front of my small apartment and sat there for a minute before getting out. The phone vibrated again. A new message, this time from Daniel. It said, "Love you, Mom. Thank you for everything." Tears filled my eyes before I could stop them, not from sadness, but from release. Because love, real love, had finally found its way back to me. I walked inside, turned on the lights, and looked around my quiet living room. It wasn't grand or new, but it was mine. The world outside was cold, but inside it was warm. And for once, that warmth came from me. As I sat down by the window, watching the snow drift down again, I thought about all the years I'd given, all the times I'd stayed silent to keep the peace. I realized something simple, something I should have known long ago. I don't have to earn love by being useful. I don't have to deserve kindness. Love isn't something given to the loudest or the youngest or the perfect. It's something that starts with truth, and sometimes with letting go. And as the snow covered the street outside, I whispered to myself, I won't be afraid to tell the truth anymore, even if it hurts.